Hi, folks. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D. for the Maoist-Third Worldist Collective. This will be a rather unusual video, even for me, and I have a propensity for making some rather unusual videos. I wanted to make clear at the outset that anything I say here is purely my own point of view. It does not reflect the view of my religion, above all, and it certainly does not reflect the view of other people who are Maoist Third Worldists. It is only my own attempt to try to reconcile those two different areas of my life, which outwardly would appear to be somewhat contradictory. In fact, when I have told people, members of my religion, that I am a Maoist Third Worldist, usually I get a look of shock or perplexity or some combination of the two. And I can understand that. I'm not stupid. I can understand why a person would be shocked. I personally do not know any other members of my religion who are communists. I know plenty of members of my religion who are capitalists, but nobody who was a communist. Now, that's not to say there are none. I assume there are. When I've read articles or books written by members of my religion, which have touched on the subject of communism, usually in a very generalized sense, without reference to any particular tendency, primarily focusing just on Marx and Engels, and that's it. What I see often is a watering down of both, which to me is not fair to either one of them. Marxism was started by Karl Marx. The Bahá'í Faith was started by Baha'u'llah. They each need to be looked at on their own merits and not to be evaluated for their worth in relationship to one another. What I am going to do is not try to evaluate the worth of either the Baha'i Faith or communism or Marxism. I have been a member of the Baha'i Faith since 1970, and I have been a Marxist communist since 1968, 2 years earlier, but approximately at the same time. Both of those events, I think, were triggered by similar things in my life. I was looking for stability, political stability, and religious or spiritual stability. I found that political stability, or whatever you want to call it, ideological stability, maybe it's a better term, in Marxism. I found that religious or spiritual stability in the Baha'i Faith, but I would never attempt to combine them. They are two entirely different facets of my life. And I live a life while experiencing a constant tension between those two things. Now, does that tension bother me? No. I like ambiguity. Many people are afraid of it, but I welcome it. I think we should all welcome ambiguity, because without ambiguity, then everything is fixed, everything is certain. There is no need to speculate. There is no need to wonder about things. We already have all the answers. And realistically, of course, that is not true. Nobody has all the answers. We all need to speculate. We all need to wonder. We all need to carefully examine ourselves, I would say on a daily basis, to think about the areas in which we might improve ourselves. So for me, making this podcast is in part an act of self-exploration or self-discovery or self-integration, trying to take these different parts of myself and not to combine them, not to treat them as if they are one and the same, because they are certainly not, but to reconcile them on some level. And I think I have, over the years, done precisely that. How successful I have been will be for you to judge. Now, I can assure you, this will not be my only video on this subject. I will explore this again in the future. I'm not sure when. I suppose at a time where I feel inspired by some new ideas, when I reach a point of awakening of some sort, and I don't mean awakening in some kind of Buddhist sense. I just mean an awakening to knowledge. Then I might make another podcast on the subject, and probably many more in the future. Today, however, I only wanted to touch on a single subject, and that is the concept of the third world. The third world is one of the most important concepts in Maoism-Third Worldism. It's even in the name of the tendency. It's that important. Now, it isn't the only important thing in the tendency. The fourth world is also important, or as I call it, using Antonio Gramsci's term, the subaltern. But certainly the third world, which I will focus on to a large extent today, is a very important aspect of Maoism-Third Worldism. Now, there is, I think, not an identical. I want to avoid making absolute comparisons. That's what I want to do above anything else. But there is a somewhat similar concept. I'll just put it in that kind of general way in the Bahá'í Faith. That concept is called the new race of men. Okay? Now, the term new race of men was used in a translation by the late guardian of the cause of God of the Baha'i Faith, Shulki Effendi, at a time when race basically was used for people. So perhaps today, a new people or new persons or a new humanity of men or something like that might be clearer. But I will stick with the translation made by Shoghi Effendi, the new race of men, just to make it clear that Shoghi Effendi was not using the word race in the way it is narrowly used today, especially in the Western world, to refer to divisions of humanity based on skin color and the shape of the eye fold, for example. He was using it in a very, very general sense to refer to people. What the point, I think, is of the term a new race of men, as the concept was developed by Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Baha'i Faith. was that if the world at large, if the Baha'i community more specifically, meaning if members of the Baha'i Faith fail in their, for lack of a better term, mission to bring about world peace or to work toward the establishment of world peace, Baha'u'llah said that he would raise up a new race of men. It's unclear exactly what he was referring to, but I think I have some ideas, my own speculation. I think he was referring to something similar to what is referred to as the Third World in Maoism-Third Worldism. The First World has largely failed to establish communism on any permanent footing. There have been attempts. They have lasted for certain amounts of time. They have ended. I would argue that probably the place where communism was best established was in the Third World, in Cuba, under Fidel Castro, the great Fidel Castro, and his wonderful revolution, which transformed the island nation of Cuba from a place of American imperialism, the major contradiction of capitalism, into an island of hope, an island of communism. Now, arguably, the effort that Fidel put into establishing communism in Cuba is falling by the wayside. Since Fidel died, his brother took over. His brother was clearly not as devoted to the cause of Marxism-Leninism as Fidel was. And so communism really does not seem to have much hope. I look around at the world. Where is communism functioning adequately? Where is the left? Where are leftists? And to be honest with you, it is hard for me to find a place that I would call genuinely leftist. It appears to me as though the hope that Marx had, certainly, that communism would begin in Europe at the end of the 19th century, never materialized. As I have discussed in previous podcasts, I think that was because Marx did not realize, for whatever reason, maybe he was too optimistic, put it that way, that Europe was dominated by the lumpen proletariat, which is a term that he used for workers without class consciousness. Now, I realize that some Maoist-Third Worldists use the term lumpen proletariat in a somewhat different way, but I'm using it in as close a way as I can to the way that Marx and Engels themselves used it. Workers without class consciousness. Marx did not have much hope in those people in terms of being vehicles for the establishment of global communism. And I think that his feeling was justified. Except I don't think that Marx recognized the extent to which most workers were lumpen proletarians, workers without class consciousness. I think that is certainly true in my own country, the United States. I think it is also true in Canada. And I think it is also true in most, if not all, of Europe, and Australia, and New Zealand, and Japan, and so on. Where is there a genuine desire to bring about revolution? I don't see it. Now, it could be that I am missing something. I'm open to that. If you think I'm wrong, if you think that there is actually a movement which shows any promise beyond a simply local level or a regional level of establishing communism, then please make a comment below this video and tell me, because I would like to know. And I would like to discuss it with you. I am always open to learning. Professors, above all, who spend our lifetimes immersed in the process of learning ourselves and teaching our students, are always, or should always, be open to learning from others. Without learning, there is no progress. We must always be willing to correct and to criticize our mistakes and to learn from them so that we don't repeat them in the future. The last century, the 20th century, from a Marxist standpoint, was largely a failure. Does that mean it was a total failure? No, it wasn't a total failure. You had people like Lenin, you had people like Stalin, you had people like Mao, you had people like Fidel. But for the most part, it was a failure. Because what has come of their efforts? I think they were extremely well-intentioned. They really wanted to establish communism. And they did to one extent or another, but where is it now? If it is here, I do not see it, and I look for it all the time. We are living in a world dominated by the major contradiction of capitalism, imperialism. Right now, I think we see it especially in Israel, which is really just a puppet government of the United States and NATO, in the way that Israel is oppressing the Palestinians, aided largely by money from the US and secondarily Germany. So what we see in the world is no hope, no promise, no communism, no socialism, just the capitalist world system, as it was called by my fellow sociologist, Immanuel Wallerstein. So, from a Marxist standpoint, the third world is not in a position really at this point to do much. It can do some things, but its power is limited, and it's limited by the cultural hegemony that Antonio Gramsci discussed. The power of the Western intelligentsia to influence public opinion in the third world has stifled efforts to bring about communism or socialism in the third world. Likewise, the new race of men referred to by Baha'u'llah, we need that new race of men right now. I mean, we really need that new race of men. I don't see it, not yet, but I think they're somewhere. 2 miles to the south of me, as I have said ad nauseum on this channel, is Mexico. The Rio Grande River, literally 2 miles down the road from me, just 2 miles down Bryan Road. That's it. You cross over a bridge and you're in Mexico. Now, it's not a particularly exciting part of Mexico. It's pretty rural down there. But it's Mexico. You want to go to a more exciting place, Reynosa, well, that's a few miles more. But other than that, I mean, there really is no hope, I don't think, beside the third world, like Mexico. And I personally believe, and I could be 100% wrong, that the new race of men is the third world, or will be the third world. Not yet, quite. As long as the US empire, which includes much of the world, dominates public opinion, dominates global culture, I don't see how it will be possible for this new race of men, the third world, to rise up. So we need a genuine awakening, going back to what the founder of critical pedagogy from Brazil, Paulo Freire, called conscientization. Consciousness raising and conscience raising. Our awareness must increase, and our moral compass must be transformed. We must stop loving money, stop loving capitalism, turn away from our own perceived needs to the needs of those who are less fortunate than ourselves, whether in the third world or the fourth world, the subaltern, who are throughout the world. Those are the people that need to be looked towards. But again, this video is primarily about the new race of men and the third world, not the fourth world. We can talk about that later. We've talked about it already a bit, especially in relationship to autism, as in my previous video. But we have a long way to go, sadly, I think, sadly, before we reach that point where the third world, or the new race of men, which in my humble opinion, and again, it's only my opinion, are roughly the same. Roughly the same. I'm not going to say exactly the same. I'm not even sure what exactly means. I don't know what exactly is. Roughly the same. Refer to roughly the same people. Maybe not exactly, but I think there is enough of an overlap between the third world and the new race of men to say that they are roughly or approximately the same people. and we really need them now. Unfortunately, they don't have power yet. And until the first world, until the dominant world, which has failed to establish world peace, which has failed to establish an enduring communist world, or even an enduring communist society, falls by the wayside, as I said before. I don't think that we will see revolution, because revolution will begin in the third world. This has been Mark, by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Maoist-Third Worldist Collective. Have a pleasant day and an even better day tomorrow.